Hi Archers! Today we'll be exploring Archero hero Taranis. This is a 6-part series where each hero from Archero will have their own guide, and the last video of the series will be a comparison between all the heroes. This way, you'll know which hero you'll want to invest in. I'm super sorry if I sound weird, I have a mouth injury so I'm trying my best to grind through it. In this guide for Tyrannous, we'll be going through the best abilities and items for Tyrannous, Tyrannous pros and cons, and the best and strongest weapon for Tyrannous. My name is Teeds and I make many Archero videos from guides, tier lists, gameplays, updates, and more. Please do subscribe and click the bell for more Archero content. Let me preface this by saying that this is all based on my experience, research, and opinion. In the end, you may or may not agree with me. It's up to you to decide which hero is the best for your personal playstyle and taste. All heroes are great in their own individual way with abilities that can be useful for different situations. With that, let's begin on Tyrannous. Throughout this guide, we'll be comparing Tyrannous to our fire hero, Furin. In our previous video, Furin was compared to our poison hero, Urusol. We'll be analysing Tyrannous' damage and also see how well he does with stacked lightning items. First, everything you need to know about Tyrannous. Tyrannous is a hero who specialises in thunder. He costs 1000 gems. This means that he can also be free, as in not having to spend real money, basically saving up all your free gems that you obtain by chance from the free gem wheel or any gem rewards you may still have. This would probably take a long time though. He has 550 health and 130 base attack, which is 50 more health and same attack in comparison to Furin. In return, we gain Tyrannus' special ability. His special ability is Thunderstorm. Tyrannus' attack will cause an enhanced lightning effect. Tyrannus cannot pick up the ability Bolt, so he cannot stack his special ability with his normal Bolt ability. Thunderstorm is a chain lightning and will only hit enemies who are close to your initial target. The thunder damage is based off 30% of your base damage. With no items and a base attack of 330, from one attack, monsters nearby the initial target will take 99 damage per proc. With no items and a base attack of 1074, from one attack, monsters nearby the initial target will take 323 damage per proc. And if you don't know what proc means in this context, it means when the effect is triggered. So when Tyrannus' thunder effect hits an enemy, that means it has been procced. In comparison, the Bolt ability deals 15% of your base damage, which is 15% less than Thunderstorm. Moving on to the best abilities and gear for Tyrannus. Just like Furin, there are a bunch of thunder abilities that Tyrannus can use to stack his thunder abilities. In the Thunder family, excluding the Bolt ability, the common abilities we'll be coming across is Bolt Circle, Bolt Sword, and Bolt Strike. Just like Furin with his fire ability plus fire family, while this is fun to do, it is not viable. The thunder abilities will stack on the enemy as their own independent proc, so you can have multiple thunder procs if you manage to meet the conditions of the thunder ability that you've picked up. While Bolt Strike is a good ability on its own due to the high initial damage and not having to manage it yourself, Bolt Sword and Bolt Circle are not that great on their own. These two abilities require certain circumstances, and while these abilities are fun in different situations, they are not viable. There are many abilities that are much better than Bolt Sword and Bolt Circle. These two abilities require you to be close to the enemy, which is not ideal, and when you're not close to them at all, it just takes up 2 ability slots that are useless when you are distant from the monsters. Instead, I would recommend picking up Attack Boost. Tyrannus' Thunderbolt ability damage does increase when picking up Attack Minor and Major Boost. Attack Boost Major adds 30% damage, so if your Thunderstorm damage was 323, it would be 419 after picking up an Attack Boost Major. This ability, however, as far as I'm aware, does not crit. I've picked up crit abilities and it didn't change anything for me, or I could have just been extremely unlucky, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but in my experience after playing Tyrannus for a while, crits don't seem to do anything for me. And other abilities I would highly recommend picking up is Ricochet. Ricochet is super strong with Thunderstorm. You can easily proc this off multiple enemies like a continuous chain effect. It's good to note that Thunderstorm will scale with Ricochet's damage each time, so the first hit will always be the strongest, and the last hit will always be the weakest. Bouncy Wall with any of the arrows plus Pierce also helps you proc Thunderstorm easily. If you're running Tornado, I would recommend just picking up Attack Boost, Diagonal Arrows, and avoiding Ricochet and Bouncy Wall. Due to the inbuilt Pierce effect, you will have an easier time proccing the ability, especially if you have Diagonal Arrows. But there is a huge con to Tyrannous, and that is multi-shot and front arrow. Multi-shot and front arrow are two of the best abilities in the game. Multi-shot and front arrow benefit your damage regardless, however it does not benefit Tyrannus' Thunderstorm. Ideally, it's best to get abilities that flow with the character you're using. Unfortunately, this is not the case with multi-shot and front arrow and Tyrannus. Just like damage boosters increase the damage of Thunderstorm, other abilities can decrease the damage of Thunderstorm. Every time you pick up multi-shot, you lose 10% of your damage but gain an extra arrow. Every time you pick up front arrow, you lose 25% damage but gain an extra arrow next to your current arrow. Because the damage is lowered, your Thunderstorm damage is also lowered. For example, if Thunderstorm's damage was 323 per proc, after picking up front arrow, it would be 242 damage per proc. And even though you gain an extra arrow, it does not increase the proc. This also goes for multi-shot, and I think with multi-shots, it's even a bigger downside. Every time you pick up multi-shot, you fire an extra arrow. You would think that you'd proc Thunderstorm twice if you picked up multi-shot once, because one multi-shot is 2 arrows. That is not the case. The proc will only trigger on the first arrow, but it won't trigger on the second arrow. I have a suspicion that the trigger has a certain time frame before it can proc again. This is only a suspicion though. I wasn't lucky enough to pick up an extra multi-shot or front arrow to test this one out, but usually I would never pick up more than one multi-shot and front arrow anyway. So even though multi-shot and front arrow are two abilities that are very strong, they only decrease the damage of Thunderstorm and they also don't trigger another proc. Even with Taranis, I have to say that you should pick up these two abilities because they are much more valuable than Tyrannus' Thunderstorm. When playing Taranis, you have to keep in mind that it does lower the damage of Thunderstorm. In regards to the Epic Vest of Dexterity, which is an armor piece that deals thunder damage to nearby enemies, this armor in my book is the best armor in the game because of the increased dodge effect chance. I would pick up the armor on any character regardless of who it is. Next, the pros and cons. The pros of Tyrannus. You can increase the damage of Thunderstorm. With the right abilities, you can easily proc non-stop. His Thunderstorm ability can connect to other enemies through walls. He can deal damage to multiple enemies in one go. He is strong in wave chapters. The cons of Tyrannus. The biggest con of Tyrannus is that he doesn't deal any thunder damage to the initial target. He will only deal damage to any monster that is near the target. Due to this, he is very situational. You have to have multiple targets near each other to maximize his damage output. Another big weakness is that he's extremely weak against single target bosses, and that's most bosses in Archero, due to the fact that he doesn't deal any initial thunder damage. Playing Tyrannus when there is only one enemy on the map, or when they're fighting one enemy on the map, and that is nowhere near any other targets to trigger the Thunderstorm effect, it's actually weaker than playing our base hero Archero. Tyrannus has a max HP of 550 and an attack of 130. Archero has a max HP of 600 and an attack of 150. So basically every time you're fighting one enemy or you're fighting a single boss on a map, you're basically weaker than our base hero. Two of the best abilities in the game, multi-shot and front arrow, do not complement Tyrannus. In conclusion, because there are so many cons to Tyrannus, he is situational, he can be weaker than Archero, and he relies on too many factors such as abilities and enemy placements on the map. Last but not least, the best weapon for Tyrannus. If you watched my Furin guide or Urusal guide, this section will be a little bit different. Tyrannus is just too situational with damage, he doesn't have an initial effect like Urusal with his poison tick and Furin with his fire tick. These calculations will not be factoring in the base crit. Let's use Furin for comparison. Both Furin and Tyrannus have the same base attack of 1074 with an epic level 40 weapon equipped. On one enemy per minute without any special effects, Furin deals 148,047 damage per minute. Tyrannus actually deals the exact same damage per minute. Remember, these are without any special effects. Now let's include the tornado weapon on one target with the special effect. Furin deals 196,377 damage per minute. Tyrannus deals 167,427 damage per minute when it procs off one enemy. Now let's change the calculation for Tyrannus, where it will proc off two enemies instead. On 2 enemies, Tyrannous will deal 186,807 damage per minute, which is still lower than Furin dealing damage to 1 enemy. For Tyrannus' damage to be higher, you'll need to proc on 3 enemies at once per minute, which would require 4 enemies close to each other, because remember that you need an initial target to proc off the enemies nearby. Also remember that the special effect will not proc on the initial target. With Thunderstorm proccing on 3 enemies, Tyrannus would deal 206,187 damage, while Furin would be dealing 196,377 damage per minute. Tyrannus attacking 4 enemies at once is still not that much higher than Furin focusing on 1 enemy. From the information here, we can determine that Tyrannus is a lot weaker than Furin. These are the numbers for the rest of the weapons per minute on a single proc for Tyrannus. Tornado takes the highest damage with 167,427 damage. Sawblade takes the second highest damage with 153,415. Death Scythe takes the 3rd place with 152,296 damage, and Brave Bow takes the last place with 130,861 damage. Now that all the numbers are out of the way, while the Tornado does show the highest damage per minute, it's good to note that in general it will always have the highest DPS than the other weapons. We have to consider the special effects of each weapon. Here is a quick visual guide on what each weapon does, on its epic form of course. Considering these factors, which weapon is the best for Tyrannus? This is based on my opinion here, as there are so many different outcomes and situations with what weapons you want to use, but I have to say the Sawblade and the Tornado. The Sawblade is just super fast, allowing you to proc off enemies more often, and with the right abilities, it can be super crazy. The Tornado with its inbuilt pierce effect and return damage, making it easier to proc off multiple enemies right off the bat. In conclusion, for 1000 gems, Tyrannus is just super weak in comparison to our previous hero Furin. He definitely is not a late game character. He thrives better in wave-based chapters. I would say save your gems here if you're aiming for stronger characters in the game. Otherwise, if you're here just to have fun, Tyrannus is still great to play, especially if he fits your playstyle. And that is all for today's video. I thank you very much for watching, and I apologize that it took so long, but Tyrannus was just so complicated. It took me a while to figure it out. Please do subscribe and click the bell to be notified for future hero guides and more Archero content. We'll be exploring Onia in the next video. Any likes and comments would be super rad, and I hope to see you again for the next one. Bye!